Science is based on the doctrine of discovery, and discovery invites discussion, invites dialogue, it invites dissent.
Well, you just said something that's not quite right. I would say science should invite discovery, should invite dissent, but it's just the opposite.
It almost becomes religious at times from some people.
Exactly. It is a religion. What do you do when people start picking on your religion and you have not a good apologetic answer? You cry foul and you say you're coming at my religion, and you get violent and you try to shut them up because they're picking on your religion. And that's what they're doing in this area.
Now, I'm going to start off by asking you just a quick question, just so that our viewers can get to know you a little bit. Could you tell us really quickly about your background in regards to science, to research, maybe a little of your home life and your faith journey as well?
Wow, that's a lot. So yeah, I got my PhD in synthetic organic chemistry, organometallic chemistry, and a postdoc in the same. I taught for 11 years at the University of South Carolina, and I've been a professor at Rice University for 26 years. So I think I'm in my 37th year as a professor, something like that. So I've been a professor for a while. You would think that I would know about something about professing. And I came to the Lord at the age of 18. I grew up in a secular Jewish home. We almost never talked about God. We never broached the subject of sin. So it was quite secular. I was in a synagogue maybe once or twice a year, probably twice a year I was in a synagogue. So it's not something that was an important thing in my life. I started working in a gas station at the age of 14. This was just outside New York City. I was born in New York City, and I grew up just about 20-minute drive north of the city. There was a gas station. There was one on each side of the highway. It was on the highway, and it was ran in and out of the city. And I worked both sides. And my job at the age of 14 was to clean the parking lots and the restrooms. And I became addicted to pornography at that time, finding magazines in the parking lots. And went to college at the age of 18. A young man shared with me the gospel. We got to talking, and he asked me if he could share the gospel with me. I didn't even know what he was talking about. I had no idea. I was new in college, and it was August of my freshman year. I was trying to make friends, and he had me look at a verse in the Bible which says, "For all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God." I said, I'm not a sinner, because in my mind, sin was something big. I said, I never killed anybody. I never robbed a bank. How could I be a sinner? And that wasn't reserved to me. That is a typical secular Jewish mindset, that little things aren't sin. And then he turned to Matthew 5:28, and Jesus said, "I say to you that anyone who looks at a woman with lust for her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." And being addicted to pornography now at the age of 18, first of all, I didn't tell people about my addiction. In those days, we didn't talk about our problems in life. Now people have problems. They start a podcast, and that becomes the focal point of their podcast, and that becomes the story of their life. And so I was deeply convicted, because it says that whoever looks at a woman with lust for her, I couldn't look at a woman any other way. That's all I knew. Then it says you've already committed adultery with her in his heart. And I knew adultery was wrong. That was one of the 10 Commandments. But how could I commit adultery in my heart? Adultery is a physical thing, but I realized Jesus is always getting at my heart. And the other thing is, why should I even care what some guy said 2,000 years ago? What does that have to do with me? I didn't know Jesus was Jewish. Who knew? The rabbis told us that Jesus was Christian. They didn't want us looking into this thing. And, it's not a total lie. It did kind of start this whole thing. But when Jesus is getting a hold of our hearts, his words have this enormous power over us. And so I was deeply convicted, and I carried that conviction. And he took me through the gospel, but I didn't accept that day. He probably could have closed the deal if he knew better what he was doing. But it was a few months later that I was so convicted of my sin that I got down on my knees in my room, and I asked God to forgive me. I said, Lord, I am a sinner. Please forgive me. And I just felt this amazing rush of power over me, and forgiveness like I'd never known. And then all of a sudden, to my right, Jesus is standing. And it wasn't so much of an optical thing, though his presence was right there, just 3 feet away from me. And I was already on my knees. I right away turned toward him, and I put my face to the ground, and I'm just weeping because it was love just poured out from him. Just love. There was no conviction. There was no judgment. It was just love being poured out. And I didn't want to get up. And I don't even know how long I was there. It wasn't like he was just flashed there and gone. No, he was just standing there. And I was just moved by that tremendously. And after a while, I got up, I wiped my tears from my eyes, and I couldn't stop thinking about Jesus. That's what I did. I just thought about Jesus every day. And at night, I would dream about Jesus. I never told anybody. I didn't know what happened. I had no context for this. And I would dream, in my dreams, I'd dream about telling people about Jesus. I didn't know that that was a prophetic dream, that he was going to show me what my life was going to become. Because I tell people about Jesus all the time. If I go a week without leading somebody to the Lord, it's a wasted week for me. And then 2 weeks later, the guy who had shared with me saw me walking there in the dormitory. He says, Jim, if you received Jesus in your heart, I didn't know the context for how to process such a question. And I said, well, I think I have. Why do you ask? He says, you haven't stopped smiling for weeks. Something's different about you. And I said, I certainly feel different. How can I stay close to God? He said, if you read your Bible every day, you'll stay close to God. If you don't, you won't. Shortly after that, I started reading the scriptures every day. And so for 47 years, I've read the Bible every day, and I mean every day of my life. And so that's my story. If you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, send me an email, tour@drjamestour.org, and we will get together, and I will share with you about why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus.
That's beautiful. And I just really appreciate just the journey you shared with us on how you went through this very deep and personal experience with Jesus. You know, and that's what every believer needs, right? Not just scientific knowledge, but a personal experience with God. Now, we're going to jump right into this discussion on the origins of life. And the reason why is because I recently watched a debate that you had with a man by the name of Professor Dave Farina, who's also well known on YouTube. You did an Origin of Life tour. Could you explain to us what is the dominant scientific perspective on the origins of life, and why are you critical of it?
First of all, I'm critical because it's nonsense. The current paradigm is that there was some pond and there were lightning strikes, and it caused simple molecules to come together to form the molecules of life. Those molecules of life then came together, and you got the first cell. And that cell then became the origin for all of the life that we see today. They became multicellular organisms, which then slithered out of the pond, and that's what you have. Now they talk, well, it may have happened in a hydrothermal vent, these vents coming out of the ocean that can get to several hundred degrees centigrade. Sometimes people talk about coming from interstellar space, that the first cells came from there. Now, if that's the case, I could accept that it came from interstellar space, but that's not the question. It's really the question of what's the origin of first life? Where did that cell come from? How did that cell come about? And so, if some aliens planted it here, I'm okay with that. Where'd the aliens come from? We're talking about the origin of first life. But all of these models that they have, this primordial soup model, they're all a bunch of nonsense. That's why I'm skeptical, because none of them work. None of them work. And one of the ways you could test this is you could try to bring me onto your channel with an origin of life researcher. but I'll require you that they have a PhD so they understand me. Because when I went through that debate, and that was the first debate of my life, I'd never had a debate before, but this was with a YouTuber. He calls himself by the title professor, but he's just a YouTuber, and he didn't understand what I was talking about. He could not fathom the chemistry. That's why I say if you can get a PhD, they have to have a PhD in organic chemistry, synthetic organic chemistry, or a PhD in biochemistry. I will come on the channel and they can present their scenarios and I'll discuss with them. But I know I'll never be back in that way because you'll never get any of them coming on. They refuse to talk with me, which should tell you immediately that there's a problem here. And with every passing year, the problem becomes bigger because we get further away from that target. And so that's the primordial soup model. None of them work because small molecules don't just come together based on lightning strikes. And then they have to start hooking together, and then you have to get them in pure form. So none of the steps work. None of them have been demonstrated. The Miller-Urey experiment, which took some small molecules and got some amino acids, fails to explain that there were many amino acids that form many carboxylic acids, many amines, and then the mixture itself would have been totally unusable. That's why after 70 years since that experiment, nothing's come of it. Nothing. So the basic models, just the science itself screams out, these don't work. And that's why I'm so skeptical.
I remember watching that debate, and exactly what you just said was so true. When you were presenting multiple lines of evidences and barriers, I noticed that he just kept denigrating you. And I thought to myself, he doesn't have an answer for these things, so he's just reverting to this ad hominem. But I remember watching this debate where you were presenting 5 barriers. And I remember I was watching the video and I was trying to take a screenshot on those 5 insurmountable barriers that you presented to the origins of life. However, I did find them somewhere else. And you can elaborate a little bit more, but I remember you talked about polypeptide formation, you talked about polynucleotide assembly, you talked about polysaccharide synthesis, you talked about specified information in polymers, and then you talked about assembly into integrated living systems, or in other words, cell formation. And you said these are 5 barriers, and I remember you kept writing on the board, we're clueless about this, you're clueless about this, you're clueless about this. And I just remember systematically you were showing in a very scientific and logical way, look, these are barriers that you cannot surmount, in regards to the origin of life, and you don't have answers. And that's why he kept reverting to the denigration. Could you elaborate a little bit about these 5 insurmountable barriers to the origins of life theory?
First of all, there are 5,000 insurmountable barriers. I chose 5. They could have been, and it could have been much more. I just chose 5 because I had to somehow limit it, and I think we didn't even complete all 5. So I gave him all the small molecules. Making the small molecules with enantiopurity, meaning handedness, is a very difficult problem. In fact, the one class of molecules, the sugars that he said the foremost reaction makes, I said that would be useless. You can't use the foremost reaction. He says, what do you mean? The foremost reaction makes these. Well, just a paper just came out this year by a top origin of life researcher, Ramanand Krishnamurthy, saying that exactly what I said, that the foremost reaction would be unusable because it makes too many compounds. It doesn't make what you want. So you don't have the small molecules, but I gave him that. Let's say you had the small molecules. How do you hook them together? We don't know how to hook together the amino acids to make the polypeptides. These are all the things that make up the enzymes, that make up our proteins. We don't know how to hook these together. And the reason for that is because when you're hooking molecules together, you have to hook one end. It has one end and another end. You have to hook this up like this. And what happens is they have other pendants hanging off that can get in the way, that can end up hooking up, and they're not supposed to hook up. Nobody has ever solved that problem. Nobody. So we don't know how to make the polymers of the amino acids. If you take the sugars, you don't know which are called saccharides or carbohydrates. We don't know how to hook those up. Those are very difficult because they have many different pendants hanging off that would conflict. So we can't make the polymers of those. Then the other things are the nucleotides, which make up the DNA and the RNA. We don't know how to hook those up. There's no chemistry to hook those up on a prebiotic earth. You need enzymes to make all of these things. The enzymes haven't been made yet. This is a prebiotic earth. So we can't make any of the 3 classes of polymers that have to be made. We have no idea of how to make those. So those are 3 of the 5 questions. Then the next question was the specified information. You need an informational code. Of these polymers that we can't make, if you had the polymer, you have to have some code to say how are they going to arrange, how are they going to give you the code for building. So your DNA, the way DNA works, is it is the arrangement of the 4 different letters, the 4 different nucleotides, and that arrangement spells out how the proteins, the little enzymes that build our bodies, are going to be arranged, and then those proteins go and carry out the tasks. Nobody knows where the origin of information is. I'm not the only one to say this. Everybody's saying this. Everybody thinks so. Yeah, we have no idea of the origin of information. And then the last thing is, if I gave you all the polymeric materials, all the small molecules you wanted, in fact, if I just took a cell and deconstructed it, which we can do. You can deconstruct a cell. So you have all the molecules that were there in the cell. Now just put it back together again. And in that I'm giving you all the polymers, you already have the specified information. The information is there. Can you, if you had all these components, could you put them together to form a working cell? And nobody who has a PhD, who knows this stuff, would ever say that they can put them together to start working and forming a living system. So those are 5 questions. None of them can be solved. But I'm telling you, there are 5,000 questions. Those are just 5 of 5,000 that need to be solved, that we have no solution to. And so that's why we have no idea where life came from. That's how clueless we are. Because of you, millions of people have heard the gospel. If you confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that he's risen from the dead, and you will be saved.
That's right.
That's the requirement. We talk about science concepts which draw people in. Take these nanomachines and have them drill into cells. This would be a great way to kill cancer, right? We also talk about Jesus Christ, who's the best in everything.
My faith in Jesus Christ means more to me than anything.
If you could continue to give or give for the first time, we would certainly appreciate it. You can go to jesusandScience.org/donate. All U.S. donations are tax deductible. Thank you so much.
Dr. Tor, I know you touched on this a little bit. Someone might, push back and say, now we have much more advanced models for how life might have originated. Why do you think these still fall short? What are some of the issues there with some of these more advanced models?
You mean more advanced models than we had 2 years ago when I proposed these 5 barriers? No, we haven't had more advanced models in the last 2 years. No, they still hold. None of them are solvable. In your model, you're going to have to make these molecules. In order to make life, we're made out of molecules. And we're not made out of silicon chips. So we're made out of molecules. So you're going to have to solve that. Any cell is made out of molecules. So you got to start with the components to make a cell. We don't know how to solve those. So nobody knows how to do that. We don't know where the code came from. And even if you had all the molecules, we don't know how to assemble them together. We don't know how to do this. It's unknown because there's so many non-covalent. That means not hooking molecules together, just the way molecules align with each other. So many non-covalent interactions that need to be precise. In fact, these have been estimated. So a single yeast cell, which is a very simple cell compared to a cell that might make up a human, but a simple yeast cell, there are 10 to the 79 billion combinations of just protein-protein interactions. So that's called the interactome. 10 to the 79 billion is a 1 with 79 billion zeros after it. It's a very, very big number. It's, just give you an idea, all the atoms in the universe is 10 to the 90. So a 1 with 90 zeros after it. That's all the atoms in the universe. We're talking 10 to the 79 billion, a 1 with 79 billion zeros after it. So these numbers are just crazy large for how these things can order. And you have to get precision on this. So nobody knows where this came from. And so the way a cell works is that when it's dividing, it takes that information and it moves some of the information to one side, some of the information to the other side, so it's duplicating it, and then it necks down. So each new cell has that sort of interactome alignment. But where the first one came from, we have no idea. So all of these still hold. In fact, they hold even more so, because we're learning, each year we learn more about the cell and the complexity of what's going on here. And so the target becomes further away. So even if people think they're moving closer, the target that we're going toward is moving further away much, much faster. So that's the problem. That's the inherent problem. And even like I said, just in April of this year, Krishnamurti comes out and says, yeah, this foremost reaction that you were banking on, which was the only what's called autocatalytic reaction, which would get going and continue to propagate, that was relevant to origin of life. The only one that was relevant to origin of life, Krishnamurti is saying, it doesn't look autocatalytic to me. You can't get your saccharides this way. So even the one reaction that they had to say that might be an autocatalytic reaction that's relevant to origin of life. Now, as of April this year, it's just what I've been saying all along. It's a bunch of nonsense. It was a red herring. It doesn't work.
Yeah, it sounds like from what you're saying that time has not worked in favor of the origin of life theory, and that time is showing that these problems are far more concrete, that they're not just going to be easily solved. You know, you signed the Discovery Institute's Dissent from Darwinism paper. Now, for those that don't know, Discovery Institute is a think tank. It's the organization for intelligent design. But what was the tipping point for you to publicly dissent from, the conventional theory of Darwinism?
Well, there was no great tipping point. So what happened was I received that statement in somewhere around 2000, and it came to me in an email, and it said, could you agree to this? And the statement goes something like this. I'm paraphrasing, but it's only like 2 sentences. We think that random mutation and natural selection is inadequate to explain the diversity of life. Therefore, further research is warranted. That's it. So I can agree with those 2 statements. So that said, could you agree to this? I had never heard of the Discovery Institute. In fact, I don't even remember who sent it to me. Maybe it was the Discovery Institute. So I got that and I replied, yes, in that I can agree to it. I was plowing through emails like we all do. I mean, you're just trying to get through them. I didn't put any thought into it more than a few nanoseconds that I could agree to this thing. So it wasn't like, oh, am I going to dissent? I just said my mind. I mean, that I don't see how these things can account for evolution. So those are the classical Darwinian evolutionary aspects. And now even most biologists don't buy that. They don't think that it's random mutation and natural selection. It's actually the small changes, it's neutral drift, the small changes that occur from parent to child, and the theory of universal common descent. That's what they say is accounting for the diversity of life. So even most biologists would agree with that statement. And then the other half of the statement, therefore further research is warranted. I have never known a scientist to say that further research is not warranted. I mean, you cut off all your funding when you say that. So it doesn't take much to agree to that statement. It wasn't until 2005 that became the touchstone of the debate in the Dover trials, where people were trying to get intelligent design into schools, and people held up that. I think that people, the supporters of intelligent design in schools were holding up that statement and saying, here, we got this statement from these, 700 scientists that said that they agree with this. And then that's when the signing of the statement became, nationally known. And that was the next time I ever heard of that statement. I had never even heard of it between the time I signed it in like 2000 or 2001 till this happened in 2005. And then it was like in the New York Times, I think, and my name was there that, here's a credible scientist has signed this statement. I didn't even know what they were talking about. But anyway, and so some scientists have pulled their name back from that statement. I never pulled it back because I looked at the statement again. I said, no, I agree with this statement, so why should I pull my name back from it? So, yeah, my name is still on there, and I still hold to that.
So, and I don't want to sound redundant here, and I know you touched on this a little bit. Could you share with us what you think are some biochemical or informational hurdles to Darwinian evolution, things that can't be explained?
Yeah, I'm not a biologist, so I have to be careful, but my opposition just comes from the chemistry. I don't understand how you get body plan changes, how DNA changes so dramatically, where you have to have several lines of concerted evolution occurring at the same time in the same place, and how this DNA is going to change in that way to, in a sophisticated fashion, bring about body plan changes to have one organism changing into another. We certainly see what's called microevolution, small changes within an organism. We do this a lot in my own lab. We have a whole bacterial effort in my lab, and you can see mutations occurring in populations of bacteria. And generally, what happens is it's because we're trying to kill these bacteria. We're giving them antibiotics or new antibiotic designs or molecular machines that are with these little molecular machines try to kill them. And once in a while, you find a bacterium that has some genetic information there that allows it to defend itself against that antibiotic, say. And then what it will do is you end up killing off all the other bacteria that is in that sample, except the very few that happen to have had some genetic information there that allowed them to bypass and not die from this treatment. And then what happens is those then start propagating, and they start surviving and they start reproducing. And now all of a sudden you have a whole population that is antibiotic resistant. And it had come from just a few. And then those antibiotic resistant ones can start sharing, amazingly. They start sharing their DNA with other bacteria that do not have this genetic information, and they share it. And they have these little mechanisms between bacteria where they start exchanging DNA between them. It's really quite remarkable. And then all of a sudden you get a whole population of these things. And so you see these small changes in bacteria where they do undergo these changes. But the bacteria remain bacteria. They don't change into something else. So the gross body plan changes of one organism into another, I don't understand the chemistry of how that can happen. And I'm quite open to people explaining it to me. It's purely a chemical argument.
That's really fascinating. I was just thinking as you were sharing about the traditional theory of Darwinism, and then how like individuals like Stephen Jay Gould said, hey, look, we don't see a lot of these transitions in the fossil record. So he came up with the idea of punctuated equilibrium, where you had faster mutation rates that he believed, or in other words, jumps that he believed solved the problem. What would you say to something like that?
Yeah, this is what you see in the Cambrian explosion. You see this huge diversity all of a sudden. And so when he came up with this idea of punctuated equilibrium, he says, we don't see the gradual changes that Darwin himself was talking about, small gradual change. We don't see that in the fossil record. He said we see changes occur very rapidly over short periods of time, not gradually over long periods of time. This is what he said, that it's not supporting that classical view of Darwinism in that sense, and in many ways that's more in line with a biblical view, where there were these fast creation events over short periods of time, that many new things would jump forth, and you see these fast creation events. There continue to be problems with it. But again, I'm not a biologist. My contest is from the chemical information. Let's discuss the chemistry changes that would have to occur in DNA for this to happen.
So you were sharing, about bacteria, how we can see what, and you termed it, microevolution, where we can see that, we can watch that, we can experience that take place. But then in these kind of macro jumps to become, let's say, species changes, you don't understand the chemistry. Does that distinction matter between microevolution and macroevolution?
Yeah, some evolutionists would say this is purely something that creationists have put forward. No, these terms, microevolution and macroevolution, were put forth by biologists. They had nothing to do with creationists, number one. Number two, I never said anything about a species, because we do see at times speciation changes. That is seen in nature. So, for example, for inexplicable reasons, sometimes a plant, at least in the plant kingdom, we can see this, it will double its DNA. It'll double it. And so all of a sudden you have what is technically a new species. So new species can arise, and what I'm familiar with is in the plant kingdom, it can happen. So, but what I'm saying is large body plan changes. Where you go from a whale to a cow. I mean, these are large body plan changes, and this is what is presumed, that something came out of the water and then started walking on land. These sort of changes, and there's a lot of DNA changes that would have to happen, and concertedly, meaning in the same period of time, at the same instant, that these things have to happen concertedly. So it's a rough thing trying to discuss the chemistry behind that. And my contest is based, like I said, purely on the chemistry.
Now, what do you think about irreducible complexity? I mean, does it resonate with, your findings, or do you still feel like, hey, look, in terms of biology, but also we're dealing with chemistry here and some physiology here. What do you think about that?
Well, that's Michael B. He put that forward. I read his book, probably 30 years ago when it first came out, and it was intriguing. And I think Michael has been a real stalwart. I mean, I would consider him a friend. He has been to my home for dinner, and so this idea of irreducible complexity, meaning you go back to something that fundamentally couldn't get any simpler, or else it wouldn't work. I mean that's an interesting argument to put forward. As a chemist, I wouldn't normally use that argument myself, but I think it's a fine argument that he can put forward, and that's another one of the bazillion things you can put forward to show the problems with a lot of these scientific models that are purely hypotheses. So one of the things that happens is, even in academia, they'll speak of these sort of models, these hypotheses, as if they are facts. But they're not facts. What is a fact is we see microevolution. We don't see large body plan changes in these multicellular organisms. We don't see this. And so facts are very different than hypotheses that go forward, but many hypotheses are put forward that are presented as if they were facts.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Going back to the Bible doesn't hold the line at species change. It just talks about kinds, right? Like if you're reading the story of Noah and the kinds that went on to the ark and so on afterwards. So we do see examples of, obviously, adaptation. We see minor changes. We see adjustments that take place, growth. Now, somebody might say that dissent from Darwinism is ideological and not scientific. How do you respond to that?
No, I think embrace of Darwinism is ideological and not scientific, and to really support these sort of things without having a good idea of the chemistry, I think is problematic. And you look at the way biologists will speak about these things. They'll speak in gross generalities. It's very hard to get down to have them talk about the chemistry on this thing. So it's a difficult thing. And in the origin of life as well. I mean, they'll talk about these things as if they're facts, and it's not facts at all. So it's not scientific to be holding on to these things. But there are certainly other people that see this. It's just that if you speak up, you open yourself up to criticism, you open yourself up to be called a creationist. And a creationist is the last name that people can call you in the university. So that YouTuber called me many very nasty names. He really embarrassed himself in a university environment, because that is not the way we speak in a university environment. I didn't, come back at him with any words like that. But the university, people will try to dismiss people and say, he's a creationist. He's a creationist. I never bring in creation into my arguments on origin of life. Yet I will be labeled a creationist because through that they will dismiss me. And it is purely a cop-out. They do not want to address the science, so they'll say he's a creationist, and therefore they don't have to address me. It is the last word that you can call people in the academy without getting canceled. So people are afraid of being canceled. People are afraid of losing grant funding. And so they don't want to speak up. But there are many people that see what I see. And I have people coming to me and saying, yeah, I see what you see. Don't use my name. I agree with you, but don't use my name. So they don't want to have to go through this abuse. So, I'm speaking up.
No, I appreciate your boldness too, because science is based on the doctrine of discovery. And discovery invites discussion, invites dialogue, it invites dissent. And when we don't do that, we become dogmatic.
Well, you just said something that's not quite right. I would say science should invite discovery, should invite dissent, but it's just the opposite.
Right. It almost becomes religious at times from some people.
Exactly. That's what it is. It is a religion. What do you do when people start picking on your religion and you have not a good apologetic answer? You cry foul and you say you're coming at my religion, and you get violent and you try to shut them up because they're picking on your religion. And that's what they're doing in this area. So, for example, a big podcast. I mean, millions and millions of watchers. They kind of set up discussion groups to discuss hot topics. And I was called by the producer. He said, we'd love to have you on this program to speak about origin of life. I said, yeah, let's do it. He said, and I said, but I'll only do it if I'm going to be speaking against PhD chemists or biochemists. I'm not going to do it against YouTubers again, because I present things to them they don't understand. He said, okay, I get it. He said, could you give me the names? I gave him the names of 15 people. 15 researchers in the area of origin of life that are chemists that can understand this stuff, or they're biochemists. And I said, you'll never be calling me back. He said, why is that? I said, because none of them will agree to it. None of them will come on your program, even though this program has many millions of watchers. Nobody will come on this podcast because they will not like to debate with me on this topic. He says, oh, no, I'm very good at getting people. I'll get it worked out. This is like 6 months ago. He's never called me back. I mean, nobody will come forward. That in itself is telling. And then the one occasion when Lee Cronin agreed to meet with me at Harvard, he would not address any of the questions that I put forward. He would only explain try to explain his assembly theory, which does nothing for the origin of life. It doesn't do anything to describe the origin of life. He would only address that. He wouldn't address any of the questions that I put forward. And I even said, before he got up, I said, he's going to talk about stars, he's going to talk about bubbles, he's going to do anything but talk about these questions that need to be solved. So they don't address them. So that's the way it is.
That's really fascinating. And I really appreciate, Dr. Tor, your openness to dialoguing with people and other scientific minds, especially in this area. We have two other categories of question. This next category is rapid fire. So we're gonna kind of get some short responses from you in this rapid fire section, okay? All right, okay. Question number 1, 10 questions. What's the biggest flaw, do you think, in Darwinian evolution?
Body plan changes. I mean, how do you go from one body plan to another?
Number 2, is math discovered or invented?
The mathematics in all its forms exists, and people then discover what is there. Is there invention in that discovery? One could say that the mathematics already existed, but I'm not going to pin myself down on that because I just don't know. I've never thought about that question before.
Okay. Question number 3, what's your go-to book on science and faith?
I don't know that there is a good go-to book on science and faith. Really, I'm not trying to be coy on this thing. I just don't know that you read about science and faith. I have this, there's a book on theistic evolution that I contributed to, and it's a very large book. I think it is called, maybe the title was Theistic Evolution. I just forget. So I just don't frequent those books very much. I have to critique a lot of them, and so I do read them whenever I'm asked to critique them, to give a little blurb on them. But nothing stands out as being great to me.
Okay. What's one scientific myth that frustrates you the most?
Yeah, that evolution is a fact, and that the origin of life comes from a primordial soup.
What's one question you wish atheists would ask you?
I wish that they would ask me, what is my view on the origin of life?
If you can converse with any scientist living right now, who would you converse with?
I actually think I could converse with any scientist I want to. If I just called them on the phone, I think any scientist would talk with me. So there's no one on my list that I say, wow, I wish I could talk to that person. If I wanted to talk with them, I could send them an email and they'd probably get on the phone with me.
You're definitely in that arena. What would you say about a scientist maybe who passed away that you wish you could have had a conversation with?
Oh, that's easy. Isaac Newton.
Any particular reason why?
I mean, look at what he did. He utterly changed humanity. I mean, his whole understanding of the solar system and how that works, and he and one other fellow of how they derived calculus in order to solve these things, to be able to do that. But then he's written over 1 million words on his views on theology and religion and the God of the Bible. I mean, this guy and Bible prophecy. I mean, so he would be so engaging for me. That's what bores me about most scientists is they can't engage with me in the whole other half of my brain, where I love to be able to think about theological issues. And Isaac Newton can do that, and he would run circles around me, and I would just look like a toddler.
That's fantastic. We're going to now transition into this final phase, which is more theological. So that was a good segue that you just led us into. Here's the last set of questions. And I know you're not exactly an intelligent design, researcher. You're dealing with the origins of life. You deal with, obviously, nanotechnology and chemistry. But based upon your study of the universe, whether it's the macro side of the universe or it's the micro part of the universe, what does it reveal to you about the character of the Creator?
It is ordered, it is logical, it is precise, and why the universe is the way it is, why the physical constants are the way they are. If they were just slightly, take any one of them, slightly different, life doesn't exist. It has been absolutely tuned to life. So that is the wonder of this thing, that this universe is tuned to life. And not just this universe, that this planet is tuned for life. and just the ability to look up and to see the heavens and to have a clear atmosphere, to be able to behold these things. This planet is just utterly amazing in what it's got.
So, Dr. Troll, what is that telling you about the designer himself? If you're looking at his works and you're saying, this is what I'm understanding from the world around me, what is it telling you about him?
Well, I mean, clearly God created the heavens and the earth, and I'm a big believer in that. I never use those arguments in science because I never use a God of the gaps argument. But it tells me that God loves me. It screams out that God is there and he loves me, and he's set this thing up for people. And God made men upright, but they've sought out many devices. This is what it tells me, that God is pure and right in every way, and people are not.
You know, just as you were sharing, I was just also thinking about this. I've been reading this book on Christian philosophy, and the author was stating the difference between philosophy and Christian philosophy is philosophy looks at life and its parts, whereas Christian philosophy looks at life through the lens of creation, and philosophy looks at curiosity. Christian philosophy talks about wonder and the mystery of God's ordered works, and it invites us to ask questions. That's really fascinating. Based upon your study of the scriptures, the Bible, what do you understand? What's revealed about the Creator from your study of the scriptures?
He is benevolent, he is good, he is kind, he is consistent, and he loves people enough that he would leave heaven's glory. And as it says in Hebrews chapter 2, he took on flesh and blood because his children are of flesh and blood. That God would do that, to display to us what it is to walk before him and to honor him. He displayed that to us in himself through the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Why do you think many people are atheists? I mean, and the reason I'm saying this is because many atheists aren't exactly card-carrying members of the Skeptic Society. They don't go to the atheist club. They don't have degrees in molecular biology. But why are many people adamant about God's non-existence? What's your perspective here?
Well, in many ways, we can say that they were taught that. People are not born atheists. What we're finding is that children believe in God. They are dissuaded from God as they grow up. And so I'm not sure that anyone's really born an atheist. It's something that they grow into. And I can't speak for other people, but I think that there are times, there was a time in my life, when I was a teenager that I would have said that maybe that I'm an atheist, but I never really believed that. I always found myself somehow pondering and even talking to some creator, someone greater. And so I don't know what goes through an atheist's mind who's an adult, but it's like the more we deny, the further back we fall. The more that there's a denial of the truth, the further away from heaven's gate we get. And so this is this whole idea that's put forth in, I think it's The Great Divorce by C.S. Lewis, that the more we deny this, the further away from heaven we go.
It's really fascinating. When you read Genesis 1, the Bible doesn't, argue God's existence. It simply declares it. And it's as if the scriptures, I think, are teaching that the most obvious truth in the entire universe is that there is a God. And it's so obvious that the scriptures don't go about exactly trying to argue or prove God's existence. It simply declares it.
That's interesting you should say that. Like I said, I'll lead at least one person to the Lord every week, and I never try to convince them of God. I just start speaking about his word and Jesus' coming and his death on the cross and his resurrection from the dead. I take it as a given, and even to Chinese atheists that didn't grow up in any religious background. I see conversions all the time. I see people accepting this all the time. I just take it as a given. I don't try to convince people that God exists.
That's beautiful because it's so obvious, right? And this is something I think people may know in the depth of their heart, right? Now, I got to ask you a question. We only got about 3 more questions here, and that is this. From a biblical standpoint, even a scientific standpoint, how do we explain the tension that exists between where we see elements of design in our universe, but we are very much in a fallen world where there is brokenness, where there is violence, where there is death. And the reason I bring this up, because this is a tension that's raised in the heart of many people. Even some of Darwin's, letters to other people, he was stating how could it be possible that there is a good God and yet you can see, one arachnid completely devour another, insect. How do we explain that? How would you communicate that tension, or how we navigate through that tension?
I don't think there's any easy answer to why there's so much evil in the world. This question, why do bad things happen to good people? Why does several cabins of little girls get washed away in a Texas flood? I don't think there's any answer that I know of that is satisfying. I know that there's Apologetics 101 answers. I've never found them satisfying. Nor can I cause people to walk away satisfied, but I can say this. We have a God that has entered into this world of suffering, and he took upon himself enormous suffering. He was a man from whom men hide their face. They were so disgusted with him. He was a man who was despised and forsaken of men. He was utterly despised, and he was forsaken by everyone. This is the one who entered eternity, and then it entered from eternity, entered this earth, and then he took upon himself this amazing pain. Now, many people have been crucified, but nobody but Jesus has taken upon himself the sin of the entire world. From everyone who's ever lived, everyone who ever will live, Jesus took that penalty upon himself and bore it. That is who our God is. And that he has entered into this pain at least gives me comfort that he knows what I am going through, that he knows what we go through. He is not a God who is afar off. I don't think in this life that we can understand and be content and be satisfied with these petty answers for why is there evil in the world. But what can bring us peace is that God himself went through this. So he knows me, he knows my suffering. And then the other thing on top of that is this one who went through all this suffering rose from the dead. He overcame death, and he offers us an eternal life forever, living with him, being free of this pain and death.
That's beautiful. Dr. Tor, I got one last question for you. What would you tell a scientifically minded skeptic who is searching for truth?
If they're searching for truth, what I would tell them is to give me a chance to share with you. If you do not know the Lord, you do not accept his resurrection from the dead, I will meet with you. You send me an email to tour, T-O-U-R, at drjamestour.org, tour@drjamestour.org, and we'll get together by Zoom, and I will share with you why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Just give me an hour to share with you. That's what I would say.
That's beautiful. Dr. Toro, I've really appreciated just being able to talk with you. I feel like we're just scratching the surface. I can tell even in your mind that you have lots of things that if we had lots of time and we could discuss this. But, I just also want to affirm your openness to meeting with people. You're all over YouTube, but I appreciate you willing to speak to individuals, not just the crowd or, a bunch of people in a university hall, but to the individual. And that's something we see in the life of Christ, right? The personal interview mattered to him, not just the big groups of people that were listening. And by the way, Dr. James Tour also has his own YouTube channel, so you can like and subscribe, and you can follow him there. Thank you so much for watching today. God bless you.
Thank you for joining me today. If you could give us a like, share, or podcast review, we would appreciate it. If you have any questions, you could send them to ask@jesusandscience.org, and we'll try to answer some of those questions in an upcoming video. And if you do not believe in the physical resurrection of Jesus Christ, and you want to hear about why I believe, send me an email to tour@drjamestour.org, and we'll get together by Zoom, and I'll share with you why I embrace the resurrection of Jesus Christ.